Order! Today is a Parliament meeting here today to discuss about climate change by 2030 on how we can deliver as a nation and how could the rest of the world to deal with the climate change in 2030 for the whole world. Mr. President, make your speech about what's our plans to tackle climate change for the next 8 years from now. Climate change in 2030 will rise and rise and rise every single year. And what the speaker has said about what can we do to tackle on how the way we as a nation and the other nations to deal with climate change. We need to make sure that we don't kill off chopping trees down and even especially not having forests destroyed in our nation. I'm a believer of climate change myself personally, and I believe that as things will start to grow, more houses are going to start to build, years on years and years going on forward, of course. We believe by 2030 that we will have more recognition on climate change in terms of how the way we can do things as a nation, in terms of saving the people from death, and also as well making people live longer through climate change. And I do believe that climate change in 2030 will be a big change in the whole of the world, not just the Republic States itself. But we are going to make sure that we do every step we possibly can take to go upwards with global warming and to save lives through the climate change in the next 10 years from now. Thank you, Mr. President. Now let's go to the leader of the policy party, Mr. Gulak, and please discuss your point of views on climate change and also challenge the President on what he said as well, if you've got any ideas. I believe in my party that climate change is an essential idea that we have to approach going into 2030. We know that there's a lot of chances of global warming and loads of opportunities for us to try and build to be a great nation in terms of tackling, in terms of insulating homes, to make sure that people are safe. But it will cost money, Mr. Drake. It will cost a lot more money how you approached it right there, in terms of two things. Number one, how could we fund older people to live longer through the global warming and through climate change? And number two, especially, what can we do as a government to make sure that we, by 2030, have the recognition on what you said just now on terms of climate change? Just tell me. Mr. Gulak, I think you haven't got a clue for what you were saying right there about two things, about how could we fund the older people. We are the biggest successful economies in the whole entire world, Gulak. And you're telling us, our party, that we cannot afford, or our nation, our government can afford that? Of course we can afford it. The thing is, we have to stand by that. We have to stand by global warming. We need to stand by not allowing forests, trees destroyed, fires happening, and so many others through global warming and also through climate change. It's all about saving the planet. And I do believe in our success as the richest economies in the world. We can do it by 2030. And I think you, Mr. Gulak, have got a lot of homework to do about climate change. Order! Now, after you two can bitch about climate change, Mr. Gulak and Mr. President, now let's go to the leader of the Stop Trump campaign, Joe Biden, on his point of view about the climate change in 2030. Thank you very much, Your Honour. I want to discuss about climate change. In 2030, I will probably not survive by then, as I'm an old man myself. But I do agree with Mr. Gulak. How could we fund the older people? Because a lot of older people my age are getting older and older and older and dying earlier. I believe that what Mr. Gulak said is right. And I believe that Mr. Drake should do the right thing and make sure that we do it as quick as possible to save more older people like me and my generation to live longer. Because I believe that we need proper housing. We need more benefits in terms of how the way we survive through the climate change and the global warming. We want to make sure, Mr. Drake, that we want change, because there's a lot of people in our generation who probably won't live longer with this whole climate change. Joe Biden, all due respect to you, you've done a great job in the Stop Trump campaign and even stopping Donald Trump to destroy our nation. I do believe that you and the older generation has to be patient, because funding the global warming with the whole climate change, we must do it as gradual as we possibly can. We've survived the war. We've survived bad things what Trump has done to our nation. Not using it as excuses, but for starting from today's speech, this is essential to all of us. But make sure we take it each time as we possibly can. But we will support each other, Mr. Biden. Just make sure that from today, from going forward, we will make sure that we will overcome the climate change and make sure by 2030 we'll have what we have, by making sure that each home is insulated. Make sure that forests and trees, things that are essential to wildlife, does not get destroyed. But we have to make sure we take a process on what we are thinking. Even allowing older people, the older generation, to live longer, to have their houses more insulated. Let's try and make sure we start this process slowly before 2030. But I know you're right, Mr. Biden, but we all in this parliament has to be patient. But it will come soon. And that's all we have to say right here in this parliament meeting. Thanks for discussing your point of views about climate change, and you all guys can be dismissed.